is your voice, and how you use your voice is determined by your values, okay? Being that the time is now, we are at, like, it's crunch time. It's here. I implore you to do your research. That is the purpose of this video. To spark a brain to be engaged. Like Tupac said, I might not change the world, but I'm gonna spark the brain to change the world. From my district, my House representative is the Jasmine Crockett, okay? Jasmine, the Congresswoman, right? You live in Dallas County, that you will be able to vote on marijuana reform. For all my ganja-loving Dallasites that do not vote, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're cutting off your nose to spite your face. I do implore everybody to educate yourself on how voter suppression is still a thing now. And if your vote wasn't significant, why would they be suppressing it if it didn't have any real power? So when you think about what the president's role is, the president is able to make executive orders, but he's not able to make laws. He or she. Come on now. Because up until this point, we've only really been able to say he. He or she is only able to make executive orders. When we're talking about abortion legislation, what they're really fighting for is the medical procedure called a D&C. So when people are saying abortion, what we're really talking about is the right to get a D&C, okay? So 50% of women have to undergo a D&C because of a miscarriage. As it's written in the Texas law, there's been a lot of legislation, a lot of lawsuits that you should be aware of. She went to the Supreme Court to seek for them to allow for her to get an abortion, a medical abortion, so that her doctors didn't have to be concerned about penalties or going to jail or any of those threats that are written in the Texas law. I did. They said no. A justice, one of the three that are up for re-election. Some difficulties in pregnancy, even serious ones, do not pose the heightened risk to the mother the exception encompasses. These people with no medical degree, but a gavel, that while your baby doesn't have a brain or a head, it doesn't meet the exception criteria for you to get an abortion. Make your decision based on facts and don't let nobody play in your face. Don't let nobody play in your face. Don't let nobody play in your face. Okay, I'm not gonna say that, but I'm excited to talk about Proposition R. What is Proposition R? R for reefer, okay? And by prohibiting the Dallas Police Department from making arrests or issuing citations for marijuana possession or, now this is huge, considering the odor of marijuana as probable cause for search or seizure. The main thing that police officers say is, well, I smell marijuana, so I need you to get out. You cannot, if they say they smell marijuana, you cannot say, I do not consent to search and seizure, because that is their probable cause. And so we get to vote on whether or not in Dallas County specifically, that's gonna be enforced. Good morning. If you're watching this video, you're in the state of Texas, early voting is commenced. Today is the second day of early voting, October 22nd. It began yesterday and it lasts until November 1st. And so why am I here? What made me make this video, right? Well, a few reasons. I've been observing a lot of the chatter on Instagram and political pages of people who I consider to be informed and woke. This past summer, I had my 20-year class reunion, and it surprised me among my peers, I'm not necessarily singling anybody out, how many of them do not vote or don't participate in the process. And how many people who consider themselves pro anything, pro fill in the blank, don't vote and don't think that it matters. And while that's baffling to me, because my mother was an avid voter who believed in participating in the civic process. So I've been voting since I was 18 years old. In 2004 was my first time voting, and I have voted ever since. And now I'm right at touching 40, not quite 40 yet. So voting is a natural thing, but I'm recognizing society-wise, not so much. So that's why I decided to make this video, because it's extremely important that we vote. Especially we are at the precipice of this election in 2024, where it's gonna be history made either way, okay? Now the objective of this video is not to sway you or tell you who to vote for, because that is not something that I can do. You have a civic right as a citizen of this country to have a say in what happens in this country. And to throw away that right or to not use that right in your political power is asinine, okay? And I'm not trying to be insulting. I really am trying to encourage you to step out of what you may think and do your research, get informed, and then exercise your rights. Your vote is your voice, but I also like to think that your vote signifies your values. So I'm not going to tell you where your values lie. That's something for you to decide, but I will say that you should vote with your values, okay? And I'm going to do my best because I have my opinions, okay, as an informed citizen, but I'm gonna do my best just to present the facts, because what I'm seeing is we live in the information age, but we also live in the misinformation age. And if you're in the state of Texas specifically, this video is for you. Dallas County specifically, this video is for you. There's something everybody should be able to gain. I'm gonna try to keep it high level. Yes, I don't want to get too much chatter. I have my notes and things that I want to cover, and my fact check. So I spent yesterday just researching and trying to put the information together in a way that if you've never participated in the political process, you would still be able to kind of have an idea of what to do, and where to go and why it's important, okay? What this video will cover: who can vote and am I registered? If I'm a felon, can I vote? What's on the ballot and what's at stake this November, including there are some prepositions if you live in Dallas County that you will be able to vote on marijuana reform enforcement, okay? So for all my ganja loving Dallasites that do not vote, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're cutting off your nose to spite your face. If you're saying, I don't like the candidates, if you're saying, oh, the president is this, that, and the third, I don't all the way disagree with you. However, it's bigger than the presidential election. We're talking about the three branches of government, right? All right, so starting off, who can vote? In the state of Texas, who can vote? Are you registered to vote, right? If you have ever registered, I asked somebody the other day, are you registered to vote? And they was like, I don't know. Well, if you've ever voted in the state of Texas and you register with your permanent address and the address matches your ID, you are still eligible to vote, okay? You can, if you don't remember, if it's been that long since you participated, you can definitely check at us.gov to see, can you vote? I'm gonna put a screenshot here of the website. It's really simple. All you have to do is have your date of birth, your name, and your county, and it will let you know if you are eligible and registered to vote. Unfortunately, the deadline ended to register on October 7th, so you missed the deadline, but either way, go and check on your voter registration status. So if the last time you voted was for Obama in 2008, then go and check and see, because you might can still vote, all right? If you are a felon in the state of Texas, it's a lot of misinformation out there that if you have been convicted of a felony, you can no longer participate in the political process. I personally believe, well, let me just say the rules. If you are no longer on papers, if your sentence has been discharged. So let me read directly from the website. Based on the Texas Constitution, as long as you have completed your full sentence, including any periods of incarceration, parole, community supervision, and probation, or if you've received a pardon, or you have otherwise been released from the resulting disability to vote. So you can check that at that same website too, if you are eligible to vote. But just because you've been convicted of a felony in the past, 10, 20, however many years ago, does not mean as a citizen in the state of Texas, you cannot vote. Now, what I was gonna say, which I'm now gonna say, is I personally believe if you are on parole, you should still be able to vote. Because as a citizen, you have a right to participate in the political process. Just because you break the law, I guess they say, oh, if you're not a law-abiding citizen, that doesn't take away your citizenship. And now the fact that one of the presidential candidates is a 34-time felon, even more now, don't let that stop you, okay? Because clearly, okay, now I said I'm just really trying to keep it with the facts, and that's a factual statement. Okay. All right, so now that we've covered who can vote, especially in the state of Texas, but the website, the US.gov, is wherever you are, your county. All you need is your name, date of birth, and your county. From the 22nd until November 1st to early vote. Why is early voting beneficial? Because on Super Tuesday, everybody who didn't vote in early voting is going to try to vote. And a lot of times that's where the lines are longer and people end up waiting outside the polling stations for hours even after they close because people are trying to vote. So the benefit of early voting is you can avoid the lines. There's more flexibility in the times. So you have roughly 2 weeks. It ends November 1st, which is right before Super Tuesday on November the 3rd, okay? So don't miss out on early voting, okay? Not every state has early voting. I do implore everybody to educate yourself on how voter suppression is still a thing now. And if your vote wasn't significant, why would they be suppressing it if it didn't have any real power? Yeah, just if you don't do nothing else, if you register to vote, go and vote. I should have made this video probably a month ago, but being that the time is now, we are at, like, it's crunch time. It's here. So what's on the ballot? There's a Senate seat up for election. It's Ted Cruz's seat, okay? Every 6 years, every state gets 2 Senate seats, all right? The Senate and the House of Representatives make up Congress, which is the legislative branch, which we'll touch on briefly in an overview, right? So Texas has 2 Senate seats. One of them is up for grabs, and it's Ted Cruz's seat. But there's also some House seats available. Railroad commissioners that will be voted for. There's 15 state senators that are on the bill, or that are on the ballot, rather. There's Board of Education members, okay? There's 3 members of the Texas Supreme Court, and I will tell you why that's important, because it is, all right? Okay. So before we can talk about the presidential race and who is on the ballot, it is important to understand how our federal government works, okay? We have a democracy, okay? America is a democracy, not a dictatorship. There's 3 branches, and the president is the executor-in-chief, meaning that he is in charge of the executive branch, okay? So that makes him in charge of the military. The executive branch is also in charge of enforcing laws. So that's whether or not there's troops that are deployed on the ground domestically to do certain things. That's the executive branch, all right? So when you think about what the president's role is, the president is able to make executive orders, but he's not able to make laws. He or she. Come on now. Because up until this point, we've only really been able to say he. Anyways, he or she is only able to make executive orders. And those can be fought in Congress. Congress can work against or with the president, all right? So that brings us to the second branch. So we have the executive branch. The second branch is the legislative branch. And in this particular race, there is a Senate seat, a U.S. Senate seat up for grabs, right? So it's 100 senators total, 2 from each state. Ted Cruz's seat is up for grabs. And of that 100-person Senate, then there's the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is 435 members. This is divided up by populace, not necessarily by state. So for Texas, we get 38 of that 435. I just wanted to take a quick sidebar and point out, do you see how big Montana and Alaska are, but they only have 1 and 2 House of Representatives? Whereas states like Hawaii is so small but has 2, the same amount as Montana. And the states like California and Texas have 52 and 38. We lead in representative seats. So pay attention to that, okay? So you'll know that your government works a certain way, okay? I'm not commenting on if that's good or bad, right or wrong, but you should know. And on the ballot this year, all 38 of the House of Representative seats are up for re-election. Why? Because senators serve 6-year terms. So Ted is at the end of his 6th year. The House members only serve 2-year terms, okay? So who is on your ballot for the House of Representatives will depend on your district. From my district, my House representative is the Jasmine Crockett, okay? Jasmine, the Congresswoman, right? So, and she represents very well. What your House of Representative person is responsible for is taking the issues that directly impact your district to Congress, okay? You need to vote for your Congressperson. You need to vote for your House of Representatives person, because that's the person that you can get in contact with in your district, okay? I'm pretty sure if I roll to Duncanville or wherever Jasmine is, she's there because that's where she's set up, right? She goes to Washington when Congress is in session, but that's your local politician on the federal level, okay? So if you're thinking, oh, well, I don't care about the president, I don't want to vote, that's fine. But also understand that the person who will be representing your district in Congress is also on the ballot. And I'm sorry, y'all, I promise it's the last thing I'm going to say about this because it's kind of off topic. But knowing that North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Alaska only get 1 congressional district is kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, really. Okay? And what is the legislative branch responsible for? It is responsible for passing legislation. So if there's laws that we feel are unconstitutional, laws that we feel are not right, it's the Congress that's responsible for that, right? Proposing bills. Congress is also the faction that declares war, right? So the military is under the executive branch, but it's Congress who is able to declare war, right? They also get the right to confirm or reject presidential appointees. The president can appoint various people like to the Supreme Court, okay, which we'll talk about in the next branch. And they're also able to investigate, right? So if there's somebody that is doing something wrong that is a civil servant, they can be called before Congress for a congressional hearing to be held accountable, okay? So there's a lot of power in that. The House specifically, okay, those 435 members, those are the ones that initiate revenue bills, okay? They're also able to impeach federal officials, right? And in the case of an electoral college tie, this is already a tight race. There's certain key swing states that will play a role. But in the case that we're at the precipice of a monumental election, it's historic either way, right? So it's either going to be Trump, who will make history as the first time a president lost their incumbent race and came back to win.
Upon fact-checking myself, I did find out that this wasn't the first time. In 1888, Grover Cleveland lost to Harrison, and then Grover Cleveland came back and beat Harrison and got his lick back.
It will also be the first time a president is elected that is a convicted felon, as far as I'm aware of, right? And so that's historic, for better or for worse. It's historic. And then this is also the first time a Black woman, or a person of color, however you choose to classify Kamala, she has classified herself as a Black woman, as a biracial woman, as a mixed race woman, as a person of color. And this is the first time that a woman of color is inches away from the White House, from the Oval Office, okay? So history is being made regardless, and you should be a part of that, right? Okay, so vote for your congressperson, your House of Representative person. All right, so the last branch of government, because it's 3 tiers, called the system of checks and balances. No one person is able to rule over the American government. They all play a role, okay? It's supposed to be a checks and balance system. That's how it was designed by the founding fathers in the U.S. Constitution, okay? So the last branch is the judicial branch, and that is the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the American people do not vote on Supreme Court justices. They are appointed. And so let me just tell you the role of the Supreme Court. It's the highest court in the land, and it is responsible for protecting the U.S. Constitution. It is also responsible for protecting our civil liberties, our civil rights as U.S. citizens, and it is supposed to be above partisanship. It's not supposed to be a Republican Supreme Court or a Democratic Supreme Court. They are supposed to be looking out for the American people in the Constitution, okay? But because they are appointed by presidential candidates that are bipartisan candidates, what's supposed to happen is not what happens, okay? And these are lifetime appointments. So a Supreme Court justice can be at death's door, holding on to an IV in one hand on oxygen, and also holding on to that justice gavel with the other, okay? They decide when they sit down, okay, when they retire. And it's a lifetime. So it's very important, because during Donald Trump's term and the 3 justices he appointed, that is responsible for the overturning of Roe v. Wade and protections for abortion, which we'll talk about. Also, the overturning of protections for affirmative action as it directly relates to college campuses and beyond, other institutions, okay? So keep in mind, be aware that who sits on the Supreme Court matters. It matters that they actually are trying to look out for the civil liberties and equality of each citizen, okay? It matters. All right, so with that being said, the reason for those 3 branches of government is because we're a democracy, like I said. So that means no one person can rule over the country, and it is a system of checks and balances. If you are familiar with what one presidential candidate has stated, I'll go ahead and say, because I'm giving you the facts. If you don't know nothing, these are the facts. This presidential candidate has said out of his own mouth that if people come out and vote for him, they won't have to do it again. So it won't be a 4-year term. You come vote for me. We're going to fix it. This is going to be the last time anybody gets to vote, because I'm going to lock that down, right? This is what he said. Well, I'm adding to lock that down. So let me because we're just doing the facts, right?
I love you, Christians. I'm not Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
And he has also stated, the Supreme Court, that with the justices that he appointed in these last couple of years, they've been busy, okay? And they have given immunity to the president to sit in the office and break laws. And as long as they can prove or allege that it was in the service of the country, they are not held accountable for any war crimes, any financial crimes, any violations of our privacy acts and homestead acts and anything. They will not be held accountable for. And that is already instituted. based on what happened in the Supreme Court, based on the changes that have been made. So, moving right along. In the presidential race, we have two candidates. And I'm going to only briefly touch on the presidential candidate race because it's one of the many things, and most of the information that you need to know is kind of already out there. Both Trump and Kamala have made their plans clear. So we'll start with Trump. What is Trump's plan? He wants to close down the Department of Education. He wants to make it state level, one person and another person. And this is what he's been saying as of this week, okay? Currently on the campaign trail, this is what he's saying. So you can fact check me. Please fact check me. I implore you to do your research. That is the purpose of this video. To spark a brain to be engaged. Like Tupac said, I might not change the world, but I'm going to spark the brain to change the world. Well, I might not be able get everybody, but hopefully I can spark a brain that will go and do research and now become a part of the political process. Whether it's those that are younger than me voting for the first time, or surprisingly, there are people that are in their 50s and 60s that have never voted. If you were to look up the amount of people that are eligible to vote in this country versus the amount of people that actually vote, you would be astonished to find that it's a minority percentage. So if all you do is start to look at things differently, you've missed this term, but there's elections every 2 years. It's the presidential elections and there's midterm elections. Get active, okay? Get active. All right, so let's get into the presidential election. What are the two candidates' stances? This is what they've stated based on their plan for the country. Trump has stated that he wants to close down the Department of Education. This is something he said as recently as yesterday, that he will leave it up to states to run it, and they will only get federal funding if it's agreed on the curriculum, right? So it will be determined on what they're teaching. Specifically, the question he was asked was if the state is saying that the country is built on the backs of slaves, which historically, I mean, what are we talking about here? But he said then that state won't get any federal funding, okay? These are just facts, right? The other facts is he wants to give immunity to the police because from his quotes, so that they can do their jobs, okay? Like I've stated already once before, your vote is your voice. And how you use your voice is determined by your values, okay? So whatever your values are, that's how you should vote, all right? My question, and I'm really trying to keep the commentary minimum, but my question would be to encourage you to think about that on a deeper level, because what would you need immunity for? Immunity is for those that are breaking the law. If you're not breaking the law, why would you need immunity? And why would you think that doing your job will require immunity? Doing your job does not require you to break the law as a law enforcement officer. As a police, okay? But regardless, just the information, Amber, okay? He's also alleged that he can reduce housing costs by preventing undocumented immigrants from getting mortgages and by deporting others.
Okay, so it was at this point in editing when I decided to save a lot of time, and I'm just going to do a voiceover comparing Trump and Harris's policies to get it quick and easy and out the way. All right, so I'm gonna go kind of fast, but stay tuned. Okay, so continuing with Trump. The current corporate tax rate is 21%. Trump's plan is to reduce that to 20% and 15% for companies that manufacture their products within the U.S. His plan for both corporate and individual tax is to expand the tax cuts from 2017's Tax Cuts and Job Acts. He also plans to let the Affordable Care Act lapse. He has previously stated that he does not have a plan in place to replace it, but he wants the current one to lapse. He's also for eliminating income taxes on tips, overtime pay, and on Social Security benefits. He also wants to expand the child tax credit to be $5,000 from the $3,600 it is now. Trump has big plans for China as he plans to implement 60% tariffs on goods from China, as well as to revoke their favored trade status and phase out imports of essential Chinese goods. His overall tariff will be 10 to 20%, and this is supposed to be able to stimulate the income and reduce the price to the American consumer. He also does plan on removing the U.S. from the World Trade Organization. And Trump also plans to reduce barriers on approval times for mergers and acquisitions. Why this is important to the American consumer is because now more than ever, more companies have combined, creating less price competition in the market. If you only have a few options of places to go to get your source, there's less price elasticity. So being that mergers and acquisitions will be easy, I'm interested in how that will impact the economy for the consumer. And like I think I've already said, the link to this will be directly in the description. So I'm not going to spend too much time going over everything. But another thing that's important to do your own research on is his desire to challenge the Fed's political independence. He also wants to remove the chair of the Federal Reserve, which is interesting to know. He seems to have a problem with green energy tax incentives and electric vehicle tax credits. I wonder how his boy Elon feels about that, because he wants to eliminate the tax credit for electronic vehicles. And just go look up how he wants to privatize Medicare, and he's stating that will reduce the payment somehow for it being private. And yeah.
So I do have a couple of articles that I'm going to link in order for people to go and do their own research and make their own comparisons, okay? And so Harris, of course, has her plan out there as well. And her plan includes $25,000 grants to first-time home buyers.
All right, so I'm back with the voiceover because Harris's plan is to raise the corporate tax, both for the alternative minimum and the tax rate, from 15 to 21% and from 21 to 28%. She also wants to increase the wealth tax of 25% for incomes higher than 100 million. She wants to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to individuals that make less than $400,000 a year, $50,000 tax cuts for new businesses. She wants to eliminate income tax on tips for individuals that make less than $75,000. And she wants to permanently expand the Affordable Care Act tax subsidies. One new thing that I found interesting is that Harris wants to provide new federal funding for housing construction, which will directly impact homes in older communities. So I know, like specifically for Dallas, if you are in the South Dallas or the Oak Cliff area, there are new homes being put up right next to older homes, which what that's going to do is eventually raise the property tax in the area. And so with this new incentive, homeowners, because it's based on if the homeowner actually lives in the home, are able to renovate their homes and update and get additional value to their homes. So I think it's a really great incentive. Regarding China, Harris wants to increase investment restrictions in key sectors that are related to national security, and she is also for tariffs as well. Regarding other regulations, she does want to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, to expand student debt relief, and to ban price gouging in the grocery industry. One thing I want to point out is the column in the middle is legislative action required. And we're going to talk about that because it's important when we talked about those three branches of government that you understand that means Congress has to approve. So for the sake of expedience, I'm just going to touch on a few things. Harris wants to keep the Federal Reserve politically independent. So, and to keep the same chair. And she wants to expand the out-of-pocket cap that Medicare currently has to all Americans, which I think is really great because healthcare can get expensive and $2,000 cap annually is really beneficial. She wants to help to cancel medical debt for millions of qualified Americans. Her environmental policy is a lot different as she wants to try to get more EVs out there. And then she is actually recently stated that she is pushing for a ceasefire with Hamas. So that's what she's recently stated. And we can just take it at that because before she was saying something different. And to be fair, I don't know if that's because she was trying to be supportive of Biden because Biden is a self-professed Zionist. This came out of his mouth himself. So, yeah. Okay. And so go ahead and familiarize yourself with this stuff on your own. I'm not going to really focus on any of it because, like I said, the link is available. And we've talked about the presidential election kind of enough. You have an idea to kind of be informed about who you're going to vote for if you don't know nothing else. All right. Okay, so remember when I talked about that column for legislative action required? I just wanted to briefly point out something. So if you look at the first page, pretty much everything on both of their corporate and individual tax stuff is requiring legislation, okay? But if you go to the second page in the comparison, look how many different things Trump has that will require an executive order, okay? Now, executive orders can be vetoed, but look how many executive orders he's planning on implementing to get what he wants done. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm just pointing it out, okay? You go ahead and do what you will with that information. And then the last thing I wanted to point out about this is that several things that were on here, Harris and Biden actually did try to get passed. For example, the student loan forgiveness. Congress blocked that. So when people are saying what a president has or has not done, keep in mind that that president is abiding within the system of government we have, which is checks and balances, which is why it was important to cover that in the beginning. And it's why you need to be voting for your Senate representative and your congressperson, your House representative person, so that in Congress, the yeses can be yes instead of no's. Okay?
There's a Harris as the vice president. And this is good that she's already the vice president, because you can go and research what she's done since she's been in office. A lot of times we hear a lot of chatter. I even heard Dr. Umar speaking with Nick Cannon about what has she done for Black people. If he was as informed as he is emboldened, okay, to offer his opinion, I think he would have known some of the things that she's done while she's been in office that do, in fact, directly benefit Black people. Okay, so that's enough about the presidential election. That's all I really have to say about that. Take your time and based on your values, who you gonna vote for, okay? Moving on to the Senate race for the state of Texas. There's two options, because Ted Cruz, it's time for, his term is up. I can't say if it's time for him to go. How we vote determines if it's time for him to go. But if you know a little bit about Ted Cruz, and like I said, I'm just presenting the facts now. In the winter storm in 2021, okay, Ted Cruz, the storm began Wednesday, February the 10th. Ted Cruz, on Wednesday, February the 10th, booked he, his wife, and his children a trip to Cancun. Okay? Now, why is that important? Why is that important? How is that relevant? Ted Cruz is also, the good news about him already being a senator, okay, that the information is out there. And we're going to vote with our values, right? I will link both, and Colin Allred is his opposition. Colin is already also in the House of Representatives, which serves 2-year terms. He's trying to move from the House to the Senate and get that 6-year term, okay? And so you can vote. There will be links on their voting records currently and what they have voted for. If you go and see what Ted Cruz has voted for as a U.S. Senator, because he is your local representative on the federal level, no on a bill to protect and expand nationwide access to fertility and treatment, including in vitro fertilizations. So you can see what he's voted yes for and what he's voted no for. No for tax relief for American Families and Workers Act of 2024. He voted no for that. So your values should determine your vote, all right? If you cool with your senator not wanting you to get some tax relief, then continue to vote for Cruz, right? On the other hand, you could also see some of the other things he did. So familiarize yourself with that, okay? For real, it's really important. The Right to Contraception Act. This has nothing to do with abortion. It has something to do with pregnancy prevention. And he voted no, okay? So just go look. Just go look. Don't take nobody word. Don't read headlines, because we live in a generation of misinformation and where people read headlines and never do a Google search. Oh yeah, I read that and it's now a fact. Proof positive. What we did to Harris in the last election, how many Black people, how many respected Black voices just knew she sent 1,000 Black men to jail because nobody really took the time to research. And then once they started to research after she became the candidate, they had to come back and apologize, right? So just make your decision based on facts and don't let nobody play in your face. Don't let nobody play in your face. Don't let nobody play in your face. Okay, I'm not gonna say that no more. I'm not gonna say that no more. Okay. So yeah, he was gone during the winter storm in 2021, where people were without power for days, where people died. He was in Cancun. Why is that important, right? Well, typically in a disaster, the federal office holder's primary role is to communicate with the federal branch, including the president, the immediate needs of their district or their state. So in this case, it will be his state. For the House representative member, it will be their district, right? And so the first official move he should have been doing as a senator was to send a letter to the president to make a request for emergency disaster relief and to declare it as an emergency disaster, right? And so he did send a letter. The other senator at the time was John Cornyn, and they sent the letter, but it went out on the 14th. He booked that flight that day. But 4 days later, he handled his official responsibility. So it's really just, hey, I present the facts. I'm presenting the facts. Colin Allred, just gonna give you a little bit of information about him, overview. He was raised in Dallas, okay? So he is from the Triple D. He played professional football, but he also became a civil rights attorney. He's a current U.S. House of Representative member, okay? So you can actually click and see how he's voted on certain things. I went through his voting record, okay? And I was able to see how he votes on a lot of things, and some things actually surprise me. Like, for example, which one? The Israel Security Assistance Support Act. He voted no on that. And the good thing about this site, which is votesmart.org, you can click on directly, well, what does that mean? He voted no. What does that mean for me, right? So I'm going to click and see. Now, go on now with your ads and stuff. On this, it tells you how people voted. Now, the act did pass, but Colin voted no. Republicans voted, 208 Republicans voted yes. The majority of Democrats voted no. Okay, what did they vote no to? To pass a bill that specifies that no federal funding may be used to withhold, halt, or reverse or cancel the delivery of defense articles in defense to Israel. So what the people wanted to do was make sure that nobody can stop the money going to Israel. Nobody can stop it. That's what they passed. It was passed, but he voted no on that. So however you feel about money going to Israel, money going to Ukraine, you can do research and find out who's for it and who's against it, wherever you stand, okay? Do your research. Next, the U.S. House. We've already covered the importance of it, and all of them are up for grabs. Familiarize yourself with who your House of Representative member is for your district. Like I said, I'm District 30. My House of Representative is Jasmine Crockett, and I will be voting for her because she does what she needs to do. She represents, and so yeah, we just gonna stick with it. However, so it's 38 seats. 35 are people that are rerunning, but there's 3 new seats, right? And why are there 3 new seats? Well, Colin Arred's seat is vacated because he's running for Senate. And then District 26 and 12, those people decided not to run again. Okay, so just familiarize yourself with that. Let's talk about Texas issues specifically. Issues that are specifically going to be on our ballot that may not be on other states' ballots. That was the federal stuff. We're talking about the state stuff now. There are several Supreme Court justice seats up for grabs, right? Where the Texas Supreme Court has 9 justices. They're trying to elect 3. All of the justices in the Texas Supreme Court, as well as the Texas Court of Appeals, are all Republican. There's 9 of each. All of them are Republican. Why is this important, right? Certain things we don't get to vote on in the state of Texas. Like when Trump talks about abortion rights or will be put with the states, there are states like Georgia that got to vote on exactly what they wanted to say in the abortion legislation. So their people got to pick that. We don't get to pick that. What is in our abortion legislation is determined by the Texas Supreme Court. Okay, so these people get to rule from the bench and determine medical information about women. Now, I want to briefly pause right here because I want to talk about abortion, but I want to talk about it from a way that is really understanding what we're talking about here. When people say abortion, they think of a woman who is pregnant with a viable pregnancy and she wants to terminate it, right? However, it's deeper than that. So when we talk about the topic of abortion, I want to make it clear because it's become kind of a sensationalized term. When we're talking about abortion legislation, what they're really fighting for is the medical procedure called a D&C, which is a dilation and curettage, okay? This is the procedure that removes the fetal material from the woman's uterus, okay? I'm gonna try not to get too graphic, but if you're familiar with obstetrics and gynecology, you're familiar with the term D&C. So when people are saying abortion, what we're really talking about is the right to get a D&C, okay? Now, why might a woman need a D&C? Yes, she could want or be seeking a D&C because she's trying to terminate a viable pregnancy because she does not want to be a mother. However, 50% of women who want to be mothers, whose body rejects a pregnancy, as in they have a miscarriage, 50% of those women, they don't pass that fetal material natural. So 50% of women have to undergo a D&C because of a miscarriage, right? And so as it's written in the Texas law, there's been a lot of legislation, a lot of lawsuits that you should be aware of that are going through the Texas Supreme Court to determine what is lawful. There have been delays in care. Specifically, Amanda Zarowski, I think that's how you pronounce her name, her and her husband wanted their baby, right? So Amanda was the plaintiff and she sued. Okay, she was 18 weeks pregnant with a daughter and she named her daughter Willow, which is a beautiful name, right? She experienced preterm labor, which is a rupture of the membranes, and it was fatal to the fetus, okay? So, baby was not viable at that point, okay? Despite the condition being fatal, her doctors refused to terminate the pregnancy because there was still fetal cardiac activity. So the baby still had a heartbeat. However, the baby was not going to survive based on the medical information that was provided, right? And so the baby did pass away in her womb. And eventually, Amanda went into sepsis, which is when you have an infection in your internal organs, okay? She spent 3 days in the ICU. And she did survive. But at this point, because of what she went through, because she couldn't get the D&C that she needed to remove the fetal material, she now has possible infertility. That's just one story of many, okay? There was another young lady, and I don't want to harp too much on it, but I want people to understand what we're talking about, because people like to say, well, I'm conservative, I don't believe in abortion. You're saying you don't believe in innocent fetuses being terminated because people are reckless and don't want to have a baby. But what we're actually talking about is women's health care here. So let's not be confused about what we're actually talking about. We're talking about the right of your doctor to be able to give you the care that you need to sustain not only your life, but your future fertility. Ted Cruz is for a total abortion ban. Texas has a total abortion ban. That's not something we can vote on. It's determined by the Supreme Court and what they vote on. The second case is Lauren Hall, and she's from North Texas, right? A 27-year-old woman. She desired her pregnancy as well. So she's not reckless out here just getting pregnant and using abortions as a method of contraception. That's not the case, right? But she unfortunately found out that her fetus was developing without a skull or a brain, okay? She wanted the baby. And so she actually took it to the Supreme Court directly. And this is so heartbreaking, y'all. For her to be pregnant with a child that she wants, and then to accept the fact that the baby is not going to come into fruition, right, is really heartbreaking. She sued the Supreme Court for a right to abort the child. Like, I wish I wasn't saying this. I wish this wasn't facts, but it is, right? Okay. Get it together, girl. Get it together. So, unlike other states, in the state of Texas, the law does not allow for abortions in the case of lethal fetal abnormalities. If there's a heartbeat, which the baby had a heartbeat, they're saying the baby is alive and has rights, right? Okay. The only exception is if it threatens the life of the mother. And we're seeing, like in the case with Amanda, it threatened her life, even though there was a heartbeat, right? But because of how the law is written, she went to the Supreme Court to seek for them to allow for her to get an abortion, a medical abortion, so that her doctors didn't have to be concerned about penalties or going to jail or any of those threats that are written in the Texas law. And they denied it. They said no. So think about that. These people with no medical degree, but a gavel, right, that were appointed by voters, told this woman that while your baby doesn't have a brain or a head, it doesn't meet the exception criterion for you to get an abortion. The court ruling stated.
Okay, so it was at this point that I realized that I had conflated Mrs. Hall's story and Mrs. Cox's story. So let me go ahead and just finish out. They did deny her abortion for the baby with no brain and no head. Her and her husband ended up having to travel to Seattle in order to get an abortion for the baby.
Now imagine if they didn't have money to travel to Seattle. That's far. And Seattle is expensive. Imagine, like in the case in Georgia, they had to try to drive there. And they had to try to get there.
So if you're not familiar with the case of Amber Nicole Thurman, we do have to say rest in peace to her, as she lost her life trying to travel from Georgia to a state that had legal abortion, 28 years old. And I find it completely eerie because she has the same middle name as me, although a different spelling. And her birthday is September 16th and mine was September 15th. So anything that happens to my sister also happens to me. I heard Iyanla Vanzant say, and it just really hits home when you think about stories like this where women are dying and they don't have to. And lastly, just to briefly overview the Cox case. This is the case of a 31-year-old woman whose pregnancy was also non-viable. She had been to the emergency room repeatedly for complications. Now, in this particular case, this story is different because a district judge, Judge Maya Guerra Gamble, stated that the idea that Ms. Cox desperately wants to be a parent and that this law actually may cause her to lose that ability would be a miscarriage of justice, right? After that, Ken Paxton, which is the Attorney General in the state of Texas, appealed that ruling to the Texas Supreme Court. Okay. And so in this case, Ken Paxton also took it upon himself to send letters to the Houston area hospitals and threaten them with legal action if they allowed Dr. Carson, which was Mrs. Cox OBGYN, to perform that abortion. So the court deliberated on it, and it was her that they told that because even though the fetal diagnosis is devastating, it does not pose the heightened risk to the mother that the exemption encompasses. So they acknowledged her pain, but they stated because her life wasn't in danger, she should still have to have a child that she knows is not going to actually be alive. Okay? So, yeah.
The court ruling stated that any parent would be devastated to learn of a fetal diagnosis like this. Some difficulties in pregnancy, even serious ones, do not pose the heightened risk to the mother the exception encompasses. Do you understand why it's a problem, right? The people from the bench are determining medical care for women, okay? So keep in mind, if you say you don't vote, what you're saying you're supporting, all right? Back to the topic, because I just want to talk about abortion and what that really means for women. It's about women's health care, okay? And there's also an attack for in vitro, and they're also coming for contraceptions. Like you saw, Cruz voted against contraception in vitro. In vitro is supposed to help people that actually want to have babies. Contraception is supposed to protect people from having to have an abortion and commit murder if they don't want to have a baby, okay? All right. What else is at stake in the Texas legislature? Because who we vote, right, for the Texas Supreme Court will matter. The 3 justices that are responsible, just don't vote for any Republican justices. I'm trying to tell you, I'm not trying to tell y'all who to vote for. I said that in the beginning, and I really do mean that. But understand that it's 9 justices and all of them are Republican.
So even with just those 3 seats, that would still mean that Republicans would have a 2/3 majority of the Texas Supreme Court.
All right. What else is at stake in the Texas legislature? Because now I'm going to get to Texas Republicans because it's a little tea. It's a little juicy. The Texas Republicans don't even get along like that. Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton have been clearing house with anybody that doesn't stand with what they for. Baby, they be at them. And it's funny when you're informed about it because it's like, ooh, they be fighting over there. Okay. However, the next issue that will be on the ballot, let's talk about school vouchers. School vouchers is Greg Abbott's thing. That's what he's down for. He's a proponent of school vouchers, which pushes for Texas parents to be able to use taxpayer dollars to pay for private school. Okay, so the money that's supposed to be going into the public school system will be taken out and will be going to private institutions. Now, if you think that that's a good thing for your value set and what you know about the education, because there already might not be a Department of Education, okay, depending on how we vote. And then now, let's just present the facts, okay? Values, facts, here we are, because it's a little exhausting, all right? So Abbott, there are some rural Republicans, the Republicans that are in areas that don't have as many resources as the metropolis areas, they are against this. They're against the use of federal funds for private institutions because they recognize that it will cause a deficit to those that cannot afford to go to private institutions, right? And so a lot of people that went against the school voucher thing previously in the midterms and all those other, Abbott has gotten them up out of there, right? Because the House repeatedly blocked the voucher program. Right? And so Abbott responded by targeting the anti-voucher Republican lawmakers. All right. So certain people that were up to be reelected, they didn't win the primaries to even be on the thing because he said, nah, y'all don't want to go along to get along, so y'all got to get on, basically. Him and Ken Paxton. Ken Paxton's not on the ballot, so we ain't going to talk about Ken Paxton right now. We're not going to talk about Ken Paxton. But familiarize yourself with how these Republicans in Texas have been beefing the last 3-4 years behind the scenes, but they just don't tell us, okay? And last thing, and this is propositions. And depending on what will be on your ballot, depends on where you are. I only looked up the propositions for the Dallas County or the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So if you're in Houston, San Antonio, Austin, and you're watching this video, hopefully you watch and you find some value, okay? Let me know where you're watching from, if you're watching the state of Texas, and if you're going to early vote, and if you found this information helpful. But specifically for Dallas, I have the Box Springs. So Box Springs has Proposition A through K that cover a variety of issues. Propositions are very important because this is where the voting populace gets to directly impact what is done. Okay, so there's a variety of propositions in Dallas County. There's a lot more. So it's from A in Dallas County from A to U. So it's over 24. It's about 22 or 23 propositions that will be on the ballot. And you can familiarize yourself with each one. I'm going to put a link to Dallas City Hall for the ones that are in Dallas County because it gives you the most information about them. Propositions R, Propositions S, Propositions C, and Propositions U are interesting for Dallas County specifically. Capel has their tax rate on there. So if you live in Capel, Go vote, because the tax rate is on the ballot. If you live in Highland Park, they're voting on school bonds. Hutchins is voting on a rec center and library bonds. Irving is on a fire collective bargaining. I'm not sure what Ovia is, but they have sales tax on their ballot. Sunnyvale, they're voting on school bonds, whether they'll get a multi-purpose center, and for stadium repair. Okay, so all the stuff that impacts our day-to-day life is a part of voting. That's what I'm really trying to highlight to you. But I'm excited to talk about Proposition R. What is Proposition R? R for reefer, okay? And that proposition, and you will be able to vote on this if you're a registered voter and you're going to be voting. Shall the Dallas City Charter be amended by adding a new section that reforms marijuana possession enforcement by prohibiting the Dallas Police Department from making arrests or issuing citations for marijuana possession, or, now this is huge, considering the odor of marijuana as probable cause for search or seizure,
except
as a part of a violent felony or high priority narcotics felony investigation. Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. Go and read it for yourself, okay? But what that's saying, and I'm getting excited, okay? Because if you recognize about racial profiling, if you recognize about illegal seizures and searches, the main thing that police officers say is, well, I smell marijuana, so I need you to get out. You cannot, if they say they smell marijuana, you cannot say, I do not consent to search and seizure, because that is their probable cause. So you just got to stand on the side of the road. All they have to do is say they smell it. You can't prove it. It's not something that say, oh, yep, that's that smell, right? And then they can search your car. And so we get to vote on whether or not in Dallas County specifically, that's going to be enforced. Somebody is getting excited, right? Somebody that might have been on some papers at one point in time for that search and seizure is getting excited, because now civil liberties are being reinstated, because marijuana on a federal level is still criminalized, but it's been decriminalized because states have legalized it. In Texas, it's not illegal, but regardless of how you feel about cannabis, THC, whether you for it or not, you cannot negate the fact that the probable cause thing is epic. It's huge, okay? That's just, I'm gonna talk about it, okay? But that's huge. I'm really happy about that one. The other ones that are kind of important that you should definitely be aware of is S, T, and U. I got a text saying vote no on that. Anybody that tells you to vote yes or no for something without real context, beware. Because when I went and did my research on Proposition S, T, and U, I'm not going to vote no on all of them. The S one is, so let me go to the City Hall link I'm going to put that in the video now. And it's 33 pages, so I'm going to have to scroll, because it gives you the information on all of the propositions. Proposition S, they say vote no on this, right? That's what the text message said. And it came from a Democratic source. So be aware. Because our current mayor, and this is, I never said this, but I'm not necessarily a Democrat or a Republican, right? There's things that Republicans, I typically do vote along the Democratic ticket because your vote is your values, right? And I normally agree more with what Democrats are trying to do than what Republicans. But I think that all of them have areas. I don't believe a bipartisan set of government is best for us as citizens. And if they switch from the Electoral College to the popular vote, we would have an overhaul of how our government is ran. And it will really be a government by the people, for the people. However, because of how it is, you have to pick a side. Even if I don't agree with this, but I agree with this. And you just have to align with where your values mostly align, right? There are conservative Republican people that I agree with. There are Democrats that I don't agree with what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do makes no sense whatsoever. And we need to start leaning into some sense and reason, right? And so it's really important to research for yourself and not let no party, Democrat or Republican, tell you who you should vote for. Every year, John Wiley Price sends out his people that he's endorsing, and I support that, but he can't tell me who to vote for. I'm gonna go do my own research and figure out if I actually agree with this candidate or not, right? Okay, with that being said, Proposition S is going to change the Dallas Charter by adding a new chapter that grants standing to any resident of Dallas that brings a lawsuit against the city to require the city to comply with provisions of the city charter, ordinances, and state law, right? So this is allowing citizens of Dallas County to sue the county. Now, I'm gonna tell you just a brief story. My mother, when she was living, God rest her soul, she was down at City Hall, and they have elevated curbs, right? Through no fault of her own, it was uneven, and she tripped and fell off the curb, and she broke her ankle. She had to have surgery. She had to take time off work. She scarred up her body and all this. My mother is not a litigious woman at all, but she was hurt, right? And so when inquiring about how the city was going to make this right, that's when I found out, and this was long time ago. That's when I found out that the city is exempt from citizens suing them. And I don't necessarily think that that's right. I don't think that you should be exempt from accountability, right? Now, I do understand why they would want exemptions, because we live in a litigious society where everybody sues for the slightest infractions, and it will cost the city millions of dollars to have to defend every little suit, right? So I do understand the thought, but there has to be a balance between the two. It can't be that the city cannot possibly be held penalty wise at all, right? So personally for me, I'm not going to vote no. I'm going to vote yes. And here's why. Because what they're really trying to recover here, and it's in the language, is declaratory and injunctive relief against the city. The only way it'll cost money is the cost to actually do what they're in violation of, and then the attorney fees for the suit, right? And so as long as they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, they won't have to defend themselves. That's how I feel. Now, I don't know, but I ain't voting no, and we're just gonna keep it there. You vote how you decide. Preposition T was another one, so it's S, T, and U. It's voting to put the city manager's salary on a scale basis, and it's going to be based on a random 1,400 Dallas residents, right? And they will be able to take a survey on their satisfaction on quality of life issues, right? And so this will result in the city manager either earning additional performance money or getting fired. Why would I vote no for that? Now, the thing that causes pause is that it's 1,400, but it does say a minimum of 1,400. So it could very well be more than that. I don't know what the basis for that 1,400 will be. So I might need to do just a little bit more reading before I decide yes or no. But it is going to make the city manager's compensation be based on the results of what the people feel. The power resides with the people and power to the people, okay, in my Fred Hampton voice. You, this is Proposition U. This is another one that you might want to read up on. And I'm going to actually vote no on this one. Here's the reason why. This is trying to amend the charter by adding a new section that will have this the city council appropriate no less than 50% of annual revenue that exceeds the total annual revenue of the previous year. So 50% of new revenue will go to the Dallas Police and Fire pension. Okay, with any monies remaining of that 50% to be appropriated to increase the starting compensation of officers in Dallas. Why is this important? Dallas has an officer shortage, a police officer shortage. Due to political climates, economy, I don't quite know why, maybe training, maybe, I can't call it, but there is a police shortage. And so they are trying to increase the salaries to inspire people to become officers. Here's why I don't agree with it, because it's 50% of the annual revenue. That's too high, and that's too variable. It should be an amount, a certain amount. Like I'm not against them getting the additional funds. I'm against the 50%, because hypothetically, if Dallas were to host the Super Bowl, which technically it wouldn't be Dallas hosting the Super Bowl, it would be in Arlington, right? But people gonna come to Dallas. They're gonna turn up in all the various places, right? All that revenue that we would bring in as a city, from that, 50% would go to police and fire. But what about the schools? What about the roads? What about, so that to me is too much, okay? So I'm gonna vote no on that, but you do your research and determine how you vote. And that really is all that I have, because I've covered everything, which is a lot. Hopefully, if you made it to the end of this video, I would like for you to drop, what we gonna drop? I want to do this, okay? And I don't care what your nationality is. This is solidarity. This means you solid. It used to be the Black Power salute, but it means you solid, okay? So if you made it to the end, you solid. Put you a fist of whatever nationality. It could be the palest white in your emojis, okay? Put you a fist there that you made it to the end. And if you learned something, share it and spread the word, because knowledge is power. And the Bible says, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And the fact that so many people who I personally know will benefit from the things that we'll be voting on have told me out of their mouth directly that they won't be voting. That's the reason why. I've read people who I consider to be intellectuals and informed that have huge Black platforms that are discouraging people from participating in the political process. Like Dr. Umar, okay? Like 19 Keys at one point, but I think he got his mind right and started being more moderate, because the mindset is that, voting is not going to save us. That's what Amanda Seales has said as well. And I have respect for her perspective, especially in her stance and the way that she is for the truth. But to discourage anybody from voting, you're doing a disservice. Now, if you're saying that voting is not the only power, the only thing that we're going to need, voting is not going to save us, because that's what 19 Keys, voting is not going to save us. It's not going to save us. We have to save ourselves. I'm not disagreeing, but I'm also saying, why would you leave a huge part of your political power, a huge part of your voice, a huge part of your rights on the table for somebody else to take and use and benefit from? Because that's what's happening. And there's thousands of examples of how people who voted took themselves from being disenfranchised to enfranchised based on how they voted. So it matters. It's not just getting generational wealth that matters. It's also ensuring that our next generation for the future, matter of fact, voting matters for the past, for your ancestors that had to be beaten, that had to be tortured, that had to be whatever to vote. It matters for them. It matters for your present, for yourself, and how much money you're going to get, these roads, these schools, your health care, your taxes. It matters. And for your future generation, so that when your daughter gets older and she gets pregnant and something happens to that pregnancy, she doesn't have to fight for her life or end up dying. And you might not have a daughter. I won't say your mama, but your mama probably ain't gonna get pregnant, you know what I'm saying? But your sister, your niece, your cousin, whomever, vote like your life, their lives, our lives depend on it, because in some cases it does. Immunity for the police, if you think that that's a good thing, understand why you would vote for that. Like, really just search yourself and then go vote. Okay, you have until November 1st. I'm gonna go vote tomorrow, because yeah. Don't forget to drop and share, like, share, comment.